Welcome to Snakes and Otters, a pointless discussion of eternal questions. Get ready, we're about to live in your head rent-free. Welcome back to Snakes and Otters. This is episode 158.
I am Martin.
And I'm Robert.
And I'm Francis, sitting in the captain's chair this time. History time, gentlemen. We're continuing the second of our mini-series. I like that. You know, we're the Richard Chamberlain of podcasts when it comes to this.
I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
Yeah, I'm not
okay.
with you there, bud.
He was the king of the mini-series in the 70s and 80s. That's
Rich
what
man,
they called
poor
him.
man.
The Thornbirds.
The Thornbirds, yes.
Shogun. Count of Monte Cristo. I mean, we could go on and on. There's lots of different stuff that he did, but anyway.
Yeah, but they're all so damn cheesy.
But in the 70s, they were must-see TV.
But the entire decade of the 70s was so damn cheesy.
Well, I was going to say, that sounds like another episode, don't you?
Yeah,
the cheese of the 70s.
Yes, cheese was on the menu on television.
It's like we all
in the
lived in
70s.
Wisconsin.
Yes.
Okay, there's a lot of mileage we can get out of this.
Robert.
I'm telling you, this
That's
is good stuff. That's right. But
So anyway, this is a series about treaties.
About treaties, and not just and we were talking about this in the show prep. This is not just about the moments that they happened. This is not going to be, okay, you should know these dates and you should know these people.
Which you should.
Which you should. That's correct. You have to have that for context because we're all about that. But what came from that and why this is important? Because in many respects, these four distinct, discrete moments of treaties shaped the world that we live in today. Because, as with so many things in history, it's a process. It's not a moment.
It's a thread.
It's a thread. And this one here...
History is a tapestry.
It is. And the one we're talking about today, in many respects, I think, this does not form the modern world, but it forms what forms the modern world, which was World War I. We'll talk about that in our next episode a little bit, because that's how everything changed. But before that, this is the stuff that we don't know, that we should.
Yeah.
This is the Congress of Vienna, 1814 to 1815.
So this is the reaction to
Napoleon. Which we're going to do some Napoleon stuff next year, so I don't want to steal too much of that thunder. But in many respects, I think we can all understand that there's been 23 years of war in Europe.
Right.
When this
you start with the French Revolution, which was such a hopeful moment that people thought,
lasted for about 10 minutes.
Yeah, this is going to be something that's inspired by America. All of this, elites on one end and the peasants on the other is all going to get upturned. People are going to be treated equally, and then it all goes to shit, and you end up with the Directory and the Terror and all this stuff and the guillotine, and then Napoleon emerges. And guess what? He just replaces the Bourbon monarchy with himself and crowns himself, literally, Emperor.
That's right, which is, even bigger than was before. I'm glad you mentioned that, the American piece in that, because in many respects, the whole idea, now, Voltaire talked about this, we talked about a little bit, about freedom of religion, freedom of expression, freedom of the press, and all those things that we...
But I keep going back. See, that's why I think why the French Revolution is different.
Yeah.
So when you look at the American, and again, I know this is a little bit of a rabbit hole early for that, but I think this is important to understand why, because you're right, French Revolution kicks off all this crap that results ultimately in the Congress of Vienna.
Right.
So in America, the philosophy behind the revolution was a bit different than what was going on in Europe, because for us, we took those Enlightenment ideals and they were more broad-based.
Yes.
So while it obviously did not extend to everybody in the country, women certainly could not vote in the beginning. We still had slavery and all that, but it was still expected by those who had the franchise to better themselves. Whereas when we talked about this with Voltaire and some of the other Enlightenments, they were for all that stuff, but only for the right people.
Yeah,
right.
It was still very elitist. That's why the French Revolution happened the way it
right.
did.
And to a large degree, the revolutions that would follow America's were vengeance.
Yes.
It was everybody that had traditionally been pissed on decided to get even.
Yes.
That's exactly it.
And that's the reasoning for almost every revolution.
Yeah.
That's why we always talk about how ours is unique. Ours was not to get revenge, it was to be left alone.
Yeah, it was a revenge of the middle class. And the revenge of the middle class is, George, leave us the hell alone.
Right.
Yeah, and and yet it was still taken as inspiration for France.
Well, yes,
And I
because
think, but it wasn't a philosophical inspiration. It was a practical inspiration.
yes,
Like,
because
look what they did.
The philosophies are nearly identical. It's who they extend to.
Yeah.
And that's the difference between the American Revolution and almost every other revolution.
Yeah. I mean, to a degree, the American Revolution is an oxymoron. What do people who own all this land have to revolt about?
Right.
You know, you are the elite.
Right.
To a large degree.
It was also about, look, you're not letting us participate. So, in many ways, you can make the argument it sounds very populist.
Yeah.
But it was people who had money and influence here that had no control over what was done to them in some ways.
We're just as English as you Englishmen.
Right. And, I mean, that was the whole point.
Right. Yeah. For some. I mean, Franklin was very much clear later on.
Right.
Screw that. We really don't want representation. If they gave it to us, that's not what we're after.
Well, after a certain point,
After a certain point, that's right.
But
that's how it
offered
begins.
it earlier.
Yeah.
Who knows how things would have gone?
Yeah. We'd all be Canada. You know how cold it is up there.
I was wondering if we were going to get into this.
And I'm not eating. I'm not calling that bacon. It's ham. I love it, but it's really ham.
And give me fries, not poutine.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh my gosh! I tell you, I didn't realize we were going to get into a Bash Canada episode.
Yeah,
I love my Canadian brothers and sisters.
I mean, you're a hockey guy. You got to love Canada.
Right. I want to fight them because it's hockey, but
that's right.
Go Maple Leafs.
Dude.
Oh,
you are just
a shot across the bow there, aren't you?
No, I'm genuine. I feel bad for them. What they haven't won a playoff series in 40 years or something.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. Yeah,
but they're on the cusp.
Even the Cubs won eventually, right?
Yeah. So it warms my heart to see if the Maple Leafs can win a playoff series.
Yeah, I'll grant you that.
Okay,
but yes, they can shut their poutine holes about everything else.
All right. Let's bring us back, gentlemen.
Make some decent beer.
Good captain.
Let's bring us back here.
Reeling us back. Captain of the artillery.
Back up about 200 years and let's start over.
That's right. But you're exactly right that
we only had a sip or two of bourbon, so I'm not sure why we've gotten so silly all of a sudden.
Hey, it makes for a good podcast.
This is what happens when you day drink.
That's right.
Man, I'm going to have to start. It might make work more interesting.
There you go. Sorry, Francis. Please continue.
Please let us get back to the fact that the French Revolution was almost neither. It was vengeance, as you say.
Yeah.
I think that's a very good encapsulation.
That's what it became.
And a pull through on that, and
take all the smart, pretty people and cut their heads off.
That's right, and that's very good.
It's not necessarily a bad thing sometimes.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
But most of the pretty people weren't that smart. Well, you got the smart and the pretty, but they weren't usually the same thing.
That's usually
well, that's usually true anyway.
That's right. But anyway, it became an amazing bloodbath, as we know, and we're going to do an episode on the terror and the French Revolution.
But Napoleon emerges. He stabilizes
the waters, which is what
at least France internally.
That's right.
But then decides, let's start spreading our revolution across Europe.
Because and you're exactly right. I'm glad you mentioned that, because Napoleon was seen at the beginning as the savior of Europe by the popular people, because he's taken these essential freedoms that were philosophically underpinning the revolution, even though by the time it gets out of control, nobody cares about that. It's, whatever much blood we can get. But there was, liberté, égalité, fraternité. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
Because it's very monarchical out there. And
he codifies this Napoleonic Code, codifies some very basic freedoms for the French.
Yeah, exactly. And this is, some of this is stuff that he's stealing a little from America, but not really. Most of this is him. And we give. I know you are a vehement anti-Bonapartist.
Yes,
I want to make sure I get that all out here.
Yes, a doofus from Kentucky.
Yes.
Is a vehement anti-Bonapartist.
But you're thinking
sounds like a goofy thing to say.
Well,
okay.
Actually, it really is.
Scottish roots.
That's right. But the chicks dig that, I'm sure. Anyway. But you're exactly right.
We might be the only three people in Kentucky that understand that phrase.
Oh, God. No, our listeners are far more astute. That's why they're our listeners.
Yes.
But you're speaking of Bonapartism in its classical form. This is all oxymorons that we're using here, paradoxes. But as it eventually became, but we forget that in the beginning, what was considered Bonapartism at the time was absolutely we would recognize, embrace, and be loved.
Yeah.
It's only when it became tyrannical that our American
especially
results,
when he used the resources of the French to then try to blueprint all of Europe.
Well, see, I would
remake it in his image.
Remake it in his image.
That anybody who understood, granted, this is before Sam Clemens, pointed out that history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes.
Yeah.
Very much looking back, it's obvious to me that the way Napoleonic France turned out was inevitable.
Yes.
And the reason for that is because of Napoleon. All right? So when you look at the U.S., our revolution was designed to give people the right to have a say in their own government. That's at the core.
Right.
Now, obviously, again, not everybody had that say, but it was designed to give people here that right.
And it was actually pretty easily modifiable to
Yes.
add people along the way.
Yes, and we genius, pure genius of the founders. And you don't have that in any other revolution. And by setting himself up as the emperor, he was doomed to end up as he did.
Right. Because, again, we talked about this before, and while Washington is this huge figure in world history that does not get the credit that he deserves, he walked off the stage.
Yeah, he's Cincinnatist.
Yeah. Enough cannot be said about the idea of, okay, guys, I'm
done.
I'm handing it off.
Yep.
It's up to you now. It's your turn.
See, I mean, he turned down multiple things. He turned down a third term, but before that, he turned down being a hereditary king.
Yeah. He turned down military dictatorship. He thwarted military dictatorship.
So
he said, Congress critters are awful, but let's not shoot them.
Yeah. So, we're talking, think about that. They're awful. We're not even 10 years post-revolution, and we already realized, oh man, Congress sucks.
Yeah, but ultimately,
and we'll talk a lot more about that in the Washington, because that's the episode I want to lead with.
Oh yeah,
when we talk Washington is the meeting of the officers, and I've grown gray in your service, and we'll hit all that. But that's the difference. Napoleon never walked off the stage.
And because Napoleon not only owned the stage, he became the stage.
Yeah.
I mean, I cannot overestimate the ego of this man. And partially because
he was his own cult of personality.
He was one of the very first and best. And not that there has, not first, but he certainly did it to new levels because he could, because he came through the military background. He was a genius. There's no question on just about, he's a polymorph in all sorts of things. He understood polymath. Excuse me. You're exactly right. Okay. He understood. Thank you for the correction. He had the ability.
I mean, I'd like to be a polymorph because then I'd look like Brad Pitt. But
I don't know if I'd pick Brad Pitt, but I get your point.
You guys just cannot stay on subject today. What is it with you guys? Is it the day drinking thing?
No, it's just you're bringing up so many good things that
I keep pitching them, you keep hitting them.
Yeah, there you go.
Right. All right, that's right. There ain't no hole in anybody's glove today. That's right. Yeah. No. Okay. Back to this. We got to understand Napoleon being who he was brought these reforms, which I was trying to get at. He brings reforms.
So what are the reforms?
Representation, the law. His Napoleonic Code of Law is the big one. You have the ability no longer.
He really does codify a lot of
things
rights
that we understand. Basic human rights.
For
what we're
France,
talking about here.
They really could have newspapers.
That's correct.
And have different voices, and there was a freedom of speech moment for France.
Right, and you had the ability now. It was not just where the nobility could accuse you and throw you into prison. You've got habeas corpus. You've got all these other things that go with that.
Right, you had a real rights to trial.
To the people that were universal human rights, not just the elite get one set of rules and the others, which is right. There's the biggest difference right there.
But my sense is, yes, we start with that ideal.
Yeah.
Which, obviously a lot of that's probably going to be borrowed from us because, say, hey, let's try this. But because Napoleon pulls a McClellan and brings himself to the party, all of that is going to be meaningless fairly quickly. Because let's face it, he's not an emperor, he's a military dictator.
Yeah, calls himself first consul at first, and
yes, because he's very much into the whole Roman thing. Yeah,
right,
I get that.
And it was efficiency. It was reaching back to something that they knew was good. It was a restoration, that sort of thing. Exactly, and then. But see, conquest is the piece I'm trying to spit out here.
Yes.
That's what messes with everything. If he could have gone down as one of the great visionaries of history.
Did he have a mechanism for replacing himself?
Well, that would have. Now, I don't know.
See, that's what makes
hereditary. Yeah,
it ends up being hereditary.
It was hereditary succession again.
Right. So all he's done, as you said, Martin, he just replaced the Bourbons with himself.
Yeah,
he did, but he brought along a lot of reforms with him,
and that's
the difference.
Yes. Well, look how well that worked out for the English kings.
Well, that's correct.
They were eventually powerless,
and that would have. And I don't think Napoleon ever thought that because. Well,
no, he probably didn't, because everybody who does this sort of thing all they can see is what's immediate, right? Mm-hmm. They never see past what's going to happen when I'm an old man and my son needs to take over,
right?
Because it's never the daughter at this time,
right? And he eventually would think that way as he got older. He became concerned about succession and all that stuff like that.
Well, but again, it's still the continuation of him.
No, absolutely,
right.
You nailed it exactly.
I don't know that Napoleon ever said it, but he should have. I am the state.
Oh, he said things like that constantly. I mean, he literally was.
I'm not only the state, I am.
He says
Europe,
everything
basically.
Yeah, that's right. It is my will.
Yeah.
Whatever I want. That's all it was. I mean,
and it is this that overrides. This is why I say that Napoleon what happened was inevitable, because that mindset that we all recognize that he had. I mean, we call it a Napoleon complex for a reason.
Yeah.
Is that you cannot leave other people alone. You've got to impose something.
Right.
Whether you think it's good or not. I mean, let's face it, as we said before, nobody gets up in the morning thinking, I think I'll be evil today.
Yeah.
We think that what we want to do to other people, what we want to bring to other people, is for their own good. It's very paternalistic.
Civilized.
It is very much a condescending attitude.
Yeah.
And conquest is just the logical expression, the ultimate expression of that condescension. That's why Nazi Germany wanted to, that and Lebensraum. That's why the Soviets wanted to expand. That's why China wants to expand.
Because what Dr. Doom wants to do things.
Pardon?
It's why Dr. Doom wants to do things.
It's why Dr. Doom
thinks he's doing the right thing.
That's right. And because he knows what's really right.
Exactly.
He knows what's best. It's back to that Napoleon.
Yeah.
My will. I'm the only one that gets it.
And if he hadn't gone to Russia, Europe would be totally different today.
Well, it's a little bit of an overstatement, but you're exactly right.
I mean, think about it. The army that he had, the most powerful army Europe had ever seen, died in Russia.
Oh, yeah.
He did destroy his power with the Russian invasion.
Yeah.
He did. Bringing it to a unnatural conclusion, what could have or eventually would have had some sort of natural conclusion, because sooner or later the quintuple alliance was able to exert and come together and pull back and knock him back. Yeah. You're right, it would have taken longer, it would have been different, but sooner or later they all realized he is not in our best interest, because he won't stop. He will conquer all of us. He will devour all of us.
As soon as somebody steps outside their borders, they need to be stopped.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of what we're working on these days with in the Ukrainian war.
Well,
at least that's what we're saying is.
Well, that's obvious to us speaking today, but Europe, because remember, there's still monarchs all over the place,
and therein lies the problem.
Yes, because all of them they want to do what he did.
So this really does tie these events then to what we did last month with Westphalia.
Yes.
Westphalia is the beginning of the idea of sovereignty, of borders have meanings. And you're not to violate the internal stuff. Nations have sovereignty. So here's a reaction to someone who has now violated that sovereignty all across Europe.
Right. In a large, and I don't want to make this caveat though. He's doing it in a large, systematically disruptive manner because borders were still fluid up to this point in many ways. There are certain pieces that go back and forth
especially
all the time.
Eastern Europe.
Especially Eastern Europe, that's correct.
What is Poland? Well, nobody really knows.
Well,
at this time.
and Russia wants their fingers in it big time. And Alexander I was a very, very canny individual. Very. He was one of the great czars.
Here, Napoleon is attempting to, again, he's conquering Europe. He's implementing Napoleonic style governance, appointing brothers to kingships all over the place.
Yeah.
But it's starting to fall apart now. All of these wars are pretty continuous. They're War of the Fourth Coalition, the War of the Fifth Coalition, War of the Sixth Coalition.
Yeah.
And so you get to this point.
Them every freaking single time in all the battles that they keep going back. Austerlitz is his masterpiece.
Yes.
But by this point here, you're talking 1814, Spain has been, over time, pushed back. That's Wellington.
Yeah.
In the Peninsula Campaign. And finally, Austria and Russia and Prussia. In particular, Prussia is the dominant force at this point, have finally gotten their shit together. And
got their poop in a group.
That's right. And they literally are able to, because of Moscow and what happens in Russia, they sense...
yes, that's going to give them the opportunity.
They sense they can finally do this without having to...
Napoleon's finally broken.
That's right.
He's being pushed off the scene.
Yeah. They literally force him to abdicate.
His first exile.
They force him... in May of 1814, they actually invade France, all of them. They shrink everything down. Napoleon does not want to give up, but his marshals tell him, this is it. It's an honorable exile. We're going to let you still be a head of state to the island of Elba. A personal guard of 1,000 men. You get to play, sovereign all you want to, which is actually unheard of.
Yeah.
If you think about it, that was an unbelievably generous...
Yeah, because in the past, he either would have been the captive of somebody or just executed outright.
That's
right. And see, that's it still bumfuzzles me that they would do that. Only because, but the reason they did is they knew France was beloved. They want to bring France back into the fold.
Well, and also...
But they hate them.
Post-Enlightenment, so, it's 200 years early for this, but, it's a kinder, gentler sort of thing with that Enlightenment philosophy. I suspect it has something to do with it.
I think you're right.
A whole hell of a lot of stupidity.
It is. It's we could talk a long time about how that all
It'd be
came
like
about.
sending, Hitler off. I mean, obviously I don't equate Hitler and Napoleon, but, as far as guys who tried to take over Europe, they're relative equivalents.
Yeah.
It would be like sending Hitler off to, some island in the North Sea and said, all right, here's 1,000 of your SS and just, you stay there.
You're the king of...
Yeah. You're the king of there.
Yeah, Der Shitpaw Island. Yeah.
Very good. I like this. That's very good.
We'll even take all the Jews off of it for you, but you stay there. Not going to happen. Not going to happen.
No. You're exactly right. Well, and I think that some of this, because
this really does predate the notion that you could hold someone accountable for what we would now call war crimes.
Well, that in many respects, it's because of this mistake. I wouldn't say it's a blunder because it was meant out of those. We do not want the French to think that we are imposing ourselves. We want to put back in, and that's where we're getting back to this Congress of Vienna. We want to restore order to Europe, and the only way to do that, in their opinion, is we must have monarchical control like we had before. So, this is very Hobbesian, which we'll get into that at one point.
So they send him off to exile, invite the Bourbons back.
That's right. Louis XVI's brother, Louis XVIII.
Reestablish a Bourbon monarchy in France.
Yep.
And then they start this Congress to try to then figure out all the remaining issues.
Right. Just a little time frame. Napoleon is done in May of 1814. The Congress convenes in September of 14.
Right, and keeps going, and then all of a sudden,
he's
back.
The werewolf escapes from Elba, is what they said.
Yeah.
And this is
Napoleon II Electric Boogaloo really happens. He comes back.
If you're going to do that,
and it's called the 100 Days.
That's right.
It's March to July.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, and of course, Waterloo is the the piece.
Wellington, in fact, leaves the Congress.
Because he's the British representative.
Yeah, he's representing Britain. He says, "Oh crap, you guys keep talking. I got some more shit to do."
They bring the coalition back together,
and then go and defeat Napoleon at Waterloo, and that's the final defeat.
That's correct.
And the real exile then now to
And
St.
that's,
Helena.
in many respects, that egg on the faces of them who were trying to play nice is what sets in concrete the approaches from that point forward to those who will not comply.
Right.
That's one of the reasons, and I do believe that's kind of the whole notion of war crimes, and we are going to hang your ass if you do this. That starts with Napoleon, because we're not going to have that shit again.
Yeah.
We're not going to be nice to you and have you come back again and make us all look stupid. Because there was no way the 100 Days could have ever led to anything really. At best, Napoleon could have stayed in France and become the monarch there. That's what he asked for. But then he invades Belgium, for God's sakes, because he knows he has to go back to war in order to save himself.
And that's what he's good at.
That's the only thing he's good at, really, in respects, in the end.
That's it. That's my whole point. He brought himself to his emperorship.
Yeah.
He is a military dictator.
Absolutely.
Military dictators they do two things. They terrorize their own people in some banana republic.
Yeah.
And or, because they're not mutually exclusive, they invade their neighbors.
Right. And that's what he did, because he was, and militarily, we talk about geniuses. Napoleon is a genius in many, many ways, but militarily he does things which we look back now and thinking, well, duh, obvious, but they'd never been done before. He goes in and he lightning fast. He innovates all over the place. He seamlessly has artillery, cavalry, infantry come in these lightning maneuvers,
combined arms,
and it just absolutely rolls over these other guys every single time. It's only until Wellington comes, who by this time has learned his tactics, mind you.
Well, for the last 100 to 150 years. The Spanish tercios were the model for all warfare. That's the squares, the blocks.
The squares.
That's right.
And the Spanish did those better than anybody during the 30 Years' War. And until the muskets got better, until the artillery got better, and then somebody figured out how to combine them like him, that was the ultimate way to do it.
Uh-huh.
So it just it's like World War One. Once you start entrenching, until the tank and the machine gun come along,
that's the technological race.
So I think that's a good stopping spot, because that's a lot of the background. Because we still got to really hit what they were actually trying to do, and I want to make sure. I want to make sure we also bring up a key figure that emerges from this very important guy. But let's do our
Bourbon break.
Bourbon
Since
break.
we're talking French at the moment, we can talk France. No Napoleon here. No. He's sent to St. Helena. Although his tomb is
your
still
French
in France.
accent's really shit.
Of course it is. Absolutely. Of course. What else?
Outrageous French accent.
You silly king. That's exactly right. But we're talking Bourbon, as in bourbon, as our bourbon break.
So we're.
You should never ever do that again. Never ever call bourbon Bourbon.
Okay.
It's just,
it is obviously where the word is from.
That's
right. But
once you start,
it comes from the county, which comes from there.
Yes, it's named after those French kings.
But we don't pronounce those French words the same way.
Yeah,
we pronounce it right.
Bourbon
and Versailles.
That's right.
Yes.
You got dang straight, baby.
So anyway, we are here at Studio M. I'm excited to welcome the fellas back to Studio M.
Always good to be here.
Indeed. We are maxing and relaxing, very comfortable.
Yeah, had our nice big breakfast at Der Waffle House.
Der Waffle House.
Enjoyment, that's right.
Young lady named, what was her name? Michaela was what was written on the back of the tickets.
I think that may be it, yeah. Oh my gosh, she was the best waitress we've had.
Oh, just the super sweetest ever.
Yeah, that's she was attentive without being overbearing. She had a great positive attitude, just
a really sweet
pleasant
smile. So thank you, Michaela. Thanks for taking good care of us. At Der Waffle House.
I gotta say, I was a little alarmed when I got there because somebody was sitting in our seats.
We didn't get our usual spot. But yeah,
I talk to the manager.
It's not going to supplant our good buddies over at Biscuit Belly. But we did appreciate Michaela this morning at Waffle House. She was super duper.
Yes.
And I have poured all the fellas a glass of Green River bourbon. This is brand new stuff.
Right. Yes,
one of those
making its Snakes and Otters debut.
Yeah, one of those deals where somebody reached back in time for a brand name that had been extinct for a while. It's out of Owensboro.
Oh, okay.
And,
Well, that makes sense because of where Green River actually is.
Yes, so it is. It's Green River. It was kind of a thing online there a few months ago when it got re-released. So I went right out and got a bottle.
Oh, so this is a very recent revision.
Yes, very
revival.
recent revival of this name. So I went right out and got us a bottle, and the fellows are trying it
What's
out.
the proof on this?
I would have to look, sir. Let me do that.
While you do that,
Well, you do. We will
about,
continue about the taste and bouquet.
I noticed initially has a very nice bouquet. Sometimes you don't get much of a sniff off of the bourbons, but this one has a very nice one. It really hits the nasal passages pretty strongly that first sip.
It sticks around in the mouth quite a bit for me.
It does.
It's a beautiful, beautiful bottle, by the way. Which I know that seems kind of esoteric, but folks, that's what sells bourbon.
Well, and I've talked about it before.
Horseshoe shaped.
Oh well, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's 90.
It's easier to see from where I am because I see how it's
Yeah, he's
see the
he's
base
handed
of
it
it's
over to me. Yeah,
shaped
exactly.
like a horseshoe.
So what was the proof?
It's 90 proof.
90
Okay, I thought it might be a little bit higher because I think the higher proofs tend to have a little bit more of that intensity.
So I get licorice. That's what it is.
Founded in 1885 is when the brand was originally out there. Pride of Owensboro is what they call it. We love Owensboro. It's a great town. A little further west for those of you who are not in Kentucky, but and it's which is really nice that most of the stuff that we have is so close to around us. Nelson, Marion County, here in Jefferson County, over in Frankfort. Taking a little bit west is a little bit of a departure. But the limestone that we have here in this state is and the water that's produced from it is really what makes such great, both the grain, the corn that goes into the bourbon.
Right. Well, and the temperature changes.
Absolutely, because they're moderate, but yet they're also distinct.
Are the extremes.
They are exactly. They are distinct.
It helps with the aging and the barrels and the way they move around in the rick house is all about the weather and the seasons.
Yeah.
So I got with ice. I got
Me too.
touch of licorice flavor out of it.
I can see that. Yeah.
And kind of a secondary flavor.
Mild.
Very mild.
Mild.
Well, it's mild, but not initially because like I said, I get that very strong but not awful
burst
tingling in the nasal passages.
See, I'm having mine neat, and you got water in yours. You got a little
no,
ice.
I have ice.
Oh, you have ice. That's correct.
Which granted does become water.
Right.
But
mine didn't have that. It didn't go into the nasal passages for me at all.
See, that's got to be the ice and a little bit of water.
It's got to be that.
You need to expand into trying ice a little bit more often because I'm telling you, it really transforms the bourbon.
Which, of course, is the intention. But it's meant to be done either way.
Yeah, but I've yet to find one that I like better neat than with a little bit of ice.
Okay, y'all. So y'all are pestering me. Y'all are
I'm just
wagging me.
I'm encouraging you to expand.
Yeah, it's just it gives such a it just blows open the flavor in a different way.
Right, yeah.
Mine's because I just took another drink. So a little esophageal.
Yes.
Nice and good warm.
After it does its bit in the nose and hangs around a little bit in the mouth, it moves its way down slowly.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is it's just kind of.
Are you getting any other flavors though? I mean, is it woodsy to you?
It's woodsy. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, I don't detect the licorice, but I'm not a licorice person anyway, so it's not gonna. I'm not gonna get picked up on that. No, I don't detect any distinctiveness. I mean, you are the most sensitive palate here. When it comes to that, you usually can pull all that out.
A little bit, not as much as real tasters can.
Well, but of the three of us,
that's right.
Yeah.
I'm getting a little bit. It's the initially for me the nose of it was a little chemical-y.
Yeah.
It was a touch too chemical-y.
I know that's a thing that you don't like.
Yeah, but once you get some in, and I had a little bit more ice with mine, so mine's a little more watered than Robert's.
But you're right. Once that water, enough of that took effect, that really moderated that chemical.
Yeah, it really moderates that, and then the flavor again. I get kind of an initial licorice note, and then the second flavor is more the kind of the woods. Not a real strong char at all.
No,
not at all.
Which,
not at all.
I mean, It's not terribly light, but it's not necessarily really dark either. But I've seen lighter bourbons.
It's a little on the darker side, not quite to like a double oaked Woodford type,
right?
But it is a darker amber, darker, like a real dark clover honey appearance.
No, that's an interesting way of putting it. Yes, that's right.
So not a light honey, but kind of that dark honey, not quite syrup color.
No. I think its syrup is much deeper, but then I think it's Cairo.
Yes.
Yeah. So but it's it's a winner. Certainly, I'm very pleased with it.
It's very mellow after breakfast bourbon.
Yes.
Why not? Bring it on.
Really should have had the maple bourbon for those, but yes. So, but yeah, it's very good. Very good.
We have some toasting to do.
Yes, we do.
Yes, thank you.
So,
please go ahead, Robert.
In our last pop culture episode, we did a tribute specifically to George Perez, and we also talked about his influences and the artists around them. And of course, one of those influences was Neil Adams, because he influenced everybody that came after him practically.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And since then, both Neil Adams and George Perez have passed.
Yes.
Adams was 80, but I hadn't heard that he was in bad health.
I hadn't either, yeah. It was
because he'd been doing live streams on Facebook for years and had continued regularly. He had been a regular participant at cons.
Yeah.
And I had met him and talked to him a couple of times at a couple of different cons here in town. He was a huckster. He was always trying to sell his art, and it was so damned expensive.
Because he was Neil Adams, and the history. I mean, he could demand that.
He would do quick head shots.
Pass the bottle back, if you would, sir.
Famous characters that did like Batman and others, and sell them for $100. Like trading card size. Like, geez, wow. I still don't have $100 for that. But anyways, I mean, he's a great artist, great man. He was the leading voice for creators' rights.
Yeah.
And compensating Jack Kirby and all of those early Marvel creators. He was one of the guys that led the fight. So he definitely deserves all the accolades we can give him.
Yeah. All of them. And he would still do miniseries, even in recent years.
Yes, he did a couple of Batman
Odysseys, which is, and if you read some of that stuff is literally batshit crazy with what he's done.
Yes.
Because he could. He was Neil Adams. He was writing and drawing.
He did a Fantastic Four one recently, too.
That's right. Visionary. No, not Visionaries, but it was it was one of those. I forget the name of it. Which is, hey, Neil Adams wants to do a miniseries. We let him do it, and he let him do what he wants to do. Exactly. And sometimes they are weird as all get out. Yeah. But they are still fun.
It's still fun
because and they're always beautiful.
So in him we have lost an incredible.
The detail of his work.
Mount Rushmore guy.
Yeah, absolutely.
You want to pick guys that go on the comics Mount Rushmore, he's one of them. Mm-hmm. Kirby, Ditko, definitely Adams, and there are going to be others. But he's one of them.
Yeah.
And then also we lost George Perez. We knew the reason we did the episode last month was because we knew that he had cancer, and that he had announced back in January he had maybe 6 months to live.
Yeah, and he didn't quite
lasted
make it that
about
long.
3.5, 4 months.
Yeah. So a great talent. One of the
just an incredible talent.
One of the cleanest, most clearest artists that I've ever seen. No matter who's inking him, when he inks himself, he was spectacular. But he would work with just about anybody. And I even saw articles recently. Of course, they've been proliferating since his passing. That in many respects, the Wonder Woman character, he saved that in the 80s.
Yes.
Yeah, because it was. I don't want to say it was doomed to obscurity. But pretty darn close. It had struggled for a long time.
Many times.
Yes.
And, one of the reasons why they kept it going was for the copyright.
Right.
And, there was talk of truly canceling it after Crisis.
Yeah. And because they weren't selling. And then Perez comes in, who is coming off of Teen Titans, so he is kind of a superstar artist at this time, and having had a career of 15 years at least, not more than that at that point.
Close to about between 12 and 15
years. Yeah, so he's one of those guys that, even though he was not always good with his deadlines, was always great for turning
into some health
really
issues,
good. Yeah.
As well as if you look at the detail he put in his books.
That's right, and that's why and he literally took over that character not long after Byrne took over Superman.
Oh, it would be at the same time.
It was the same. It was exactly the same time.
Yeah, because it was post-crisis.
You're right. Yeah, I couldn't remember if it's exactly that or
I
if it was
mean,
late,
there may have been
later.
a month or two difference.
Yeah. So
But
it was.
You're speaking Crisis on Infinite Earths.
Yes,
The big classic DC.
the first
series.
reboot
Yeah.
of their universe, and that was a true reboot
And
of the universe.
that's right. And Perez drew, and
He drew.
Did he ink it? I don't think he did.
He may have inked some of it, but I don't think he did.
But he drew the whole 12 issues, what they called a maxi series at the time.
Yes.
Which was groundbreaking in many respects. That's
Yeah.
what you'll hear him remembered for in many respects. But that Wonder Woman, he redid the mythology in many ways. He went heavy into the Greek mythology with those characters.
He said,
kind of brought her back to that.
Yeah, they're tied to the Amazons. There is a legitimate mythology around the Amazons, and he used it.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, he kind of did what Byrne is known for in a little bit different way. Byrne was known for back to basics.
Yeah.
In everything he did. And Perez did that same thing, but instead of back to basics to the original character, he did back to basics to the original source material.
Yeah.
A smart guy, obviously.
Yeah. And he made that book a force to be reckoned with.
Yes.
For something that was almost gone. So
Yeah.
to those
Yes.
great wonder
To
info.
Neil Adams and
George Perez,
Yes.
the guys.
May they forever rest in peace.
And goodness knows, as long as we're alive, they will be remembered.
Yes.
Us and
Yes.
many
It was
others.
very sad when I saw both of them.
Thanks.
It's part of my childhood.
Yeah. Thanks for the memories, guys. Thanks for the great art.
Which will live on, of course.
Yes.
Many of these works will be continually reprinted, and especially in the coming days. So
And everything is digitized now as well, so it will.
It's out there. So
until society collapses, it will be available to people. All right, so Congress of Vienna.
Congress of Vienna.
Right.
So we actually got to the Congress.
Yes.
That's right.
So all the background now, and Congress is a misleading word because they didn't really have like big sessions and speeches. It was a lot of running back and forth.
It
A lot
was
of private meetings. Again, the main players being Prussia, Russia, Britain, and then the guy weasels France into the discussion when they should have been really the object of what was going on.
They were deliberately excluded, tried to be up to
at
this
first.
point.
But the guy that emerges is Talleyrand.
Yes, right. You've heard the name. Now learn the man.
Yeah, this is one of those weird circumstances of here's a guy who serves France from the Bourbons to the Revolution to Napoleon and the aftermath, and it's like, wow, how do you survive when everyone else is getting their heads cut off? How does he survive
and thrive? Because he's in the catbird seat.
He's very much the progenitor of Casablanca's Captain Reno. I blow with the prevailing wind. When he needed to be a Bonapartist, he was a Bonapartist.
Right.
When he needed to be a monarchist, he was a monarchist.
Yeah.
So he survived the Directory and the Terror and everything when many others did not. And he emerges as this incredible diplomat who gets France back in the conversation, basically, of how do we come out of this without getting everybody else's boots on our throat.
Right. And he's brilliant in the way that he literally he's got the gift of gab, obviously, because what he does is in good old fashioned politicking. He's the one that kind of makes friends wherever he goes, wants to be, and he's one of those, weasels himself into weasel's a very good word, himself just about into every back channel discussion and gains allies, which he immediately,
in the moment.
Yeah, because he very clearly dumps them once he's inside. I mean,
and everybody's not really his friend. I mean, a lot of people can't freaking stand him.
Yeah,
but he's willing to offer what they want, and so then when they offer what they want, he'll advocate for their positions as well.
And in many respects, this brings about a far better product in the end, because the intention here, two intentions, one of which is we don't want this crap to happen again.
Well, no, that's partially it.
Yeah.
We don't want this crap to happen to us again.
Oh, okay.
And the reason I say that is because if you look at on Wikipedia, Grant, I know it's you don't use this in your papers for your professors, but for our purposes, Wikipedia is fine.
Yeah, it's good encapsulation.
If you look at the final act section, almost every one of these things are about establishing or reestablishing power and authority and enacting land grabs by various rulers and monarchs.
Which was my second part I was going to go with.
Yes.
That's
So
right.
when I say that, we don't want this to happen again, no, we don't want it to happen to us again, because everything in this list is designed to prop up single rulers, guys that were basically just like Napoleon. They just weren't as good at it.
Right, and there were enough of them to come together and say, okay, if you don't let it happen to me, I won't let it happen to you.
Right, I get that. But I'm just being a little cynical here in the as a counterpoint to this is no grand ideal.
No, it was not. It was self-preservation in many respects.
In many ways, I wouldn't have called the Treaty of Westphalia a grand ideal, but it had some seeds there, and compared to this, it absolutely was a grand ideal.
Mm-hmm.
Because this is literally a CYA treaty.
Yeah, self-serving.
Yeah, it's incredibly self-serving. And when you look at it's also interesting when you look at the people who were involved in it and they had something done for them. There are these dozens and dozens and perhaps even over 100 different principalities that are affected, and little princes, because we're talking about remnants of the Holy Roman Empire, which just dissolved, less than 10 years prior to this.
Yeah, by Napoleon.
By Napoleon, yeah. And we don't even recognize most because they're part of larger states now. They have all been subsumed.
Right. And there was some of that comes out of this, too, here, because...
but even some of that was undone, because if you look at Russia taking over most of... Because Poland disappears.
Yeah, that's
for
right.
a while.
The Netherlands becomes...
the Netherlands expands, because there was a Netherlands, but they take the part that was Belgium,
That's right.
become Belgium, into that. Finland remains part of Russia because they had annexed it from Sweden just a few years prior. All these different things are going. It's literally just redrawing the lines on the map. It's doing what the Treaty of Westphalia said you shouldn't do.
Yeah, and there's an irony for you.
Yeah,
that's right.
So in my mind, this, while it was a necessity to counteract and to fix the political chaos that Napoleon caused, it's a failure in the sense that it betrays Westphalia.
It is. It was Napoleon attempted to hegemonize, if that's a word, so many things together to blur these boundaries, and this treaty was decided, no, let's codify these specifically, and it was not necessarily in any way that took into account ethnicities or religions or any of that sort of stuff anymore. It's purely political. For example, Italy is prevented from unifying. It's kept kept in particularly disjointed states.
Right,
at this point.
Kept that way for another 50 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's only when they actually went and decided, no, we want this themselves, that it actually happened.
And by the time it happens, though, the rest of Europe has solidified into the states that we know today, relatively speaking. For Italy, by that point, it was an act of self-preservation.
Yeah, because Germany is unifying as well.
Germany becomes Germany as we know it today. At the same time, Italy becomes Italy.
Right, because you kind of got to do that, and that's
and the whole Austria is the counterbalance. Austria is the other big player in all of this mess.
Well, Austria is the big loser at that point.
Yeah,
because
initially they were a winner. They were taking over parts of Italy.
Well,
very much so.
They end up being the big loser.
And in this treaty, Austria comes off very, very well.
Yeah. Yes, it does.
Because
this is Austria's last hurrah. This is the Habsburgs' last hurrah.
Yeah, this is when they really, because essentially they're still standing.
Well, yes, because for the most part, the Napoleonic Wars was a Northern European thing, and Austria is just at the edge of that.
Right, and they were heavily involved. Them and Russia both came off very, very well with all this because France, which the previous 2 centuries under Louis and many of the others, it dominates so much.
It was Europe.
It was Europe, and that they had been thrown down. Yeah, it's because of this, and Austria sees this as an opportunity to be reclaim, the big man of Europe, the big dog. We're the ones that will control European policy. Yeah. We put the ruler in Spain back in that we want.
Yeah.
Which
is odd because it was a Bourbon.
Yeah, that's right.
Habsburg should not want that.
That's right, but politics and wars make for strange bedfellows here because it comes.
So the ending of this, again, and all this back and forth, Talleyrand emerging as kind of, he was a Bonapartist, now he's a Bourbonist. So he's trying to secure France a little place. Austria's emerging. But basically, they're dividing up these lands that Napoleon had conquered.
Right.
And not really status quo ante completely, but Russia comes out, like you said, Russia comes out ahead, Austria comes out ahead, Prussia comes out ahead.
Yeah.
Britain kind of gets what Britain wants, and so things are back.
It does, but it's not like 100 years later, which we'll talk about in the next episode, it becomes a let us big dogs divide up all the rest of you all. It's not that.
And also set the political order of those places. Not just who's going to have what land, but it's very reactionary, very much a rejection of the original French Revolution, the idea of republics and all of that. That's going to be gone. It's very much, we're going back.
At least for 30 years.
That's right.
We're going back to kingship, monarchs.
That's right.
And as you say, 30 years later, that would set the seeds for these revolutions of 1848, because the ideas behind republics and liberties and equality doesn't disappear just because the kings are back.
The people were very attached to these reforms.
Well, that's the thing. All these things that, honestly, I don't think Napoleon truly believed in, what's the 3-part slogan?
Liberté, égalité, fraternité.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Because I knew it would mangle the words. Because I knew what they were, but I was coming up with the Latin versions.
Yeah.
But these ideas are at odds with pretty much everything Napoleon did and everything that all of the other monarchs want to do.
Yeah, and everything that comes out of the Congress of Vienna.
We need to keep the people under control.
Right. But once these ideas are introduced, they're very difficult to put back in the bottle.
That's right.
Ideas are the most powerful force in the world.
Yeah. It really is. I mean, if these guys had had the internet in 1815, what happened in 1848 would have looked like nothing. Because the ideas would have spread. They would have fanned into a conflagration that would have been epic, in my opinion.
Right.
Certainly, if they'd had the internet in 1848, they would have burned down the whole damn place.
Well, yeah, I mean, and France again was kind of the center of a lot of that, because they didn't really want to let go. They wanted peace. But the Bourbons were not that successful.
Yeah.
Louis XVIII kind of fizzles out.
He screwed it up.
He big time, and then Charles X after him, who gets deposed.
Right.
And that's when they decided, well, let's bring in the Orleanist branch, but we're not going to let you. King Louis Philippe is not allowed to be called King of France. He is King of the French. So there's this republicanization, constitutionalization of the monarchy in France. He was very much under the control of the civil government. He was it was not quite a constitutional monarchy.
France had a parliament, correct?
Correct.
Yeah,
that's right.
So, I mean,
they just didn't. They wouldn't go quite. They wanted to go Republican, to another republic, but there was enough people saying, and there's European pressure on this, and really want to do that because it violates what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
So they kind of compromised, which is actually rather genius of them. That Louis Philippe is, we will let you run, we'll let you be king, but don't forget
they really didn't understand how to construct an effective legislature.
That's correct.
And they really didn't, and because the estates system of the ancient regime was okay. Well, all the priests and the bishops are a constituent assembly. It's like, what?
Well, and England was the same way. The House of Lords, the bishops are sitting.
Well, but it was you just have 2 in Britain, and 2 here. France had 4, and then that's everything turns to a big crap pile in the 1790s. That's part of it that really gets me is there's a successful example right across the channel. There's a successful example across the ocean. Why can't France get this right? And they couldn't until until 1945. They don't get it right.
Well,
anywhere close.
Well, you're
Well,
right,
they
because they go
still
back.
have a hard time with it after that.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
not that they go back to monarchist crap, but
Well, it takes de Gaulle to kind of, here's an actual effective executive, but at the same time, representative democracy.
well, yes, but even then, though, the parliamentary system is not really good for stable executives.
Yes.
That's part of the problem. Because even de Gaulle is deposed, gotten rid of, however you want to put it. He's not like overthrown, but how many republics did they end up having? Fifth,
5.
sixth?
They're on the Fifth Republic.
On the Fifth Republic.
Oh, so it's still the fifth. Okay,
Yes.
so this one's been the longest lasting of all.
This is essentially done. It's pretty much the
this
system
is
we have today.
70 years.
Yeah, that's probably
the de Gaulleist system is the Fifth Republic, and it's kind of the
okay
70 years.
Because honestly, I have a hard time keeping track of all.
Yes, but you make a great point. During the other periods, especially the Fourth Republic, governments are falling every 6 or 8 weeks sometimes, and they're just churning through.
Well, because people are never satisfied, and it's all about satisfaction.
Well, and it's
satisfaction.
So split. It's
right.
8 parties or 6 parties, so nobody ever has enough juice to stabilize anything.
Right.
You make a coalition government with this other party, and then they decide you're not parting your hair the right way, and the coalition falls. It's like, guys, y'all, the lesson of American politics is be broad-based.
That's right.
Try to have, you can't just be a party with this one thing that you're doing. Make a broad coalition of different interests.
Big tent, dare I say?
Yeah, and that is what makes American politics such a success. Is both parties make an attempt to do that.
Right.
Well, used to.
Yeah. It's like P.J. O'Rourke said. When you put Lloyd Bentsen on one tip of the wing of the Democratic Party and Jesse Jackson on the other wing, you have the bird the size of the merchandise mart. The Chicago Merchandise Mart. It's a very broad-based thing, but it gives stability.
Yeah, and that's because you have to have stability and sustainability.
Yeah.
Because if you're constantly changing governments, nothing ever happens. It's utter
nothing
chaos.
Gets done.
Yeah. And that was one of the lessons.
I feel like I cut you off, though.
I don't remember what I was going to say.
But ultimately, which is kind of, and I want to wrap with this because we're right at an hour. But we have to understand that this concert system that they put in place at this moment here, for lack of good or ill, it survives through the next 100 years. It's World War I. It has its moments. 1848 is a huge one with the revolutions. The Crimean War right after that. There were issues with that.
Franco-Prussian War
and all this stuff. It doesn't prevent wars, but it does have a means for governments talking to each other, which is, it used to be, one would send emissaries to the other, and that's the way this worked. This was the first time where they were actually coming together in the same rooms, in the same city, at the same time, and actually trying to make things happen. It is, in many respects, a precursor to League of Nations.
They did this 150 years prior in the Treaty of Westphalia. They got together in the same location.
Yes.
So this is not the first time they did that.
It's correct.
Well, even Westphalia, though, is still running back and forth between two
there are
camps.
Two different camps. But, everybody's still getting together. And because not everybody wanted to get together in the same place.
That's what changes here is they do. They get together in the same place.
Well, it's just an extension. They were
face
still
to
meeting
face.
together.
Yeah, kind of face to face. Again, not really big sessions, not UN style meetings, but 3 or 4 guys work out something, then 3 or 4 different guys that work out something, take it back to these other players.
It was even said that the salons in Vienna is where a lot of this business was taking place. Because you'd get together in the evenings and you talk about this stuff with guys that used to be your hated enemies. And now all of a sudden, dialogue has truly been opened. And you're able to coexist in the same spot and make things happen. That's what's really good about this.
De-demonizes the enemy.
Yes,
to a degree. You're realizing hey, everybody's a human here.
And we
And the
all want
cost
the
of
same
this,
thing.
yeah, the
and
cost of this is just too much.
Right. That's exactly it. And that puts us on the road to modernity. It puts in place a system that, for better or worse, lasts 100 years.
See, I don't know. Maybe I'm being a little too cynical here.
Now, that's my job.
Yeah, I know. Maybe we shouldn't start the bourbon so early. I agree with, in very broad strokes, with what you're saying. But in many ways, I see this as very much like the Enlightenment. Yeah, these are all very great and grand ideas, but only for certain people.
It's very Wilsonian.
It's very much I want to protect my elitism in my particular area.
Yeah.
That's really what this is about. I think any reference to the Napoleonic Code, even by Napoleon, is a sop to the people.
Right.
Because you turned the mob loose in the 1790s, really.
Yeah.
And everybody's in France is going to be afraid of that happening again. That's why I think the Napoleonic Code is promulgated. And ultimately, it does, with the help of the success in the U.S., because we are still a going concern, even though we don't have a huge amount of influence at this point, but we are still going. And so I think anything that acknowledges that, I think, is more of a CYA by all of these monarchs that are getting together. Because realistically, that's what this is. Representatives of monarchs trying to get back what they lost.
Yes, very much. You're very correct.
Yeah, they may put together this. It's not a permanent framework. They do something that I think maybe they recognize later. Well, that kind of worked back then. We can use that again.
Yeah.
It's not like there's a League of Nations.
No, that was.
There is
far too
no
formal. Yeah.
organization.
Yeah, nothing permanent.
Nothing permanent.
For
they have done
discussing
something
these.
that later will be looked at and seen as, well, maybe that's not such a bad idea.
Yeah.
We can build on that.
Maybe at some point this is what leads to having permanent ambassadors everywhere, which is not necessarily a bad thing. I don't know if that really helps anything.
Yeah.
I mean, gives you a place to go when you lose your passport when you're in another country. But beyond that, I'm not so sure that it's how much good that does. Well, especially with modern communications.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I'm just very cynical of this because of when I look at who the players are and what their goals were and what they accomplish. Because even though, and Martin, you talk about it lays the groundwork for 1848.
Yeah.
They don't learn any lessons.
Right. Again, it is very reactionary. It is very much we got to put all this liberal shit back in the bottle.
Right.
Thing.
Right.
All this where these people think they got rights. We got to put all that shit back in a bottle.
Right. And I think that, anything that they stumbled upon as a good framework was just because it's part of the result of Napoleon having so much success everywhere, causing so much chaos everywhere and nobody is able to mount any more wars, with the possible exception of Britain, because he didn't invade them. And the Austrians.
Right. It is the main thing that kind of comes here is at least we'll agree to talk about shit.
Right. That's exactly
at least for now, because
that's where
for now, because we can't go to war with each other because nobody's able to.
Yeah.
We don't have the willpower, much less the manpower. So let's figure this stuff out. Let's be reasonable right now, but once we leave here, all bets are off.
Yeah. And it's hard to expect much more from stuff constructed by weasels like Talleyrand.
Yeah.
That's part of it too.
Well, and when you look at the major players
and Metternich,
yeah,
somebody again. These are
side.
very cynical, Machiavellian people.
Right.
They're firmly rooted in that kind of a European Machiavellian tradition of whatever. There's no right or wrong. There's just whatever serves my country
whatever
or
wins.
my interest. Yeah, whatever wins.
Yeah.
Is what they're building on. So
right. So I recognize there's some good ideas came out of this, but other than calming things down after Napoleon,
yeah.
I'm not real.
I think that's a very valid perspective, Robert.
Yeah, because ultimately it does fail. 100 years later, it completely fails.
Well, I don't even think it takes 100 years.
No,
it fails 30 years later.
Oh, sure, it fails over and over again. They keep trying it again.
Well, yeah, but I mean, you can make the argument that if you want to look at it, if it lasts 100 years, then the League of Nations is nothing more than formalizing this, and I don't think that's true. That's why I say it fails much earlier. It's very much when you get to 1848. Even though there are more republics and democracies, it's still they're still doing the same thing. It's just now you've got people who are elected and who are politically elite instead of hereditarily elite or economically elite.
In 1848, most of these movements are crushed.
Well, that's true.
I mean, they're absolutely crushed. I mean, that's why you get in 19 whatever. Franz Joseph of Austria telling Theodore Roosevelt, "In me you see the last monarch of the old school." And he means, when he says old school, he means pre-Congress of Vienna old school.
Right.
He means, I'm it and everybody else is nothing. He
actually has a really good argument for that, considering who he was and who his family is.
Yeah. We are not only the leaders of this nation, we are divinely destined to be leaders of this nation, and therefore we are not even to be questioned. Therefore, that gives us license to crush these movements in 1848.
Right. Well, we are the nation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I am the state.
That's right.
Yeah.
Which seems a good point to end.
Because, I mean, you're to a large degree, again, you're right. That what does this really accomplish? Because it doesn't even really extinguish Bonapartism. Because it's still a factor in European politics for 100 years, too.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah, it's hard to imagine that in many ways, but it really is.
Yeah.
That's right.
I mean, there are people who still are loyal to the idea of Bonapartism. And again, the grandnephews and all that all are part of the power structure in France later. And
loyalty to the emperor was a thing for a long time.
Absolutely.
So I think that really, really runs through that pretty good there, Francis. So what's next time, man?
Code of Honor next time. We're going to talk about
Code of Honor.
That's right. We really gets philosophical, gets deep on some stuff here. We're going to do some great quotations from who knows whom, and it's always a good time. So make sure you're here with us.
Hope you enjoyed another pointless discussion of eternal questions. Remember, new episodes published every Friday at noon Eastern.
Spread the word. We're on all the major podcast platforms. And leave us a comment or review because that helps others find us.
We're on Instagram, Twitter, as well as our website, snakesandotters.com.
I'm Martin.
And I'm Robert.
And I'm Francis. Join us next week. Same snake time, same otter channel.